Hello, how you doing? This is Fantasy Football RSVP, Waiver Wire Week 7. Fantasy Football of the season. Let's just talk generally about waiver wire. First off, as far as waiver wire is concerned, I know a lot of people like to, pick up a filler where they think that a particular player is going to actually help them over the next week or two, which is important. Sometimes you need a win. Generally speaking, I try to stay away from that unless it's absolutely necessary or there's a filler that is an absolute dunk shot. And the reason why is because you're putting people on your team that you're going to drop in a week or two. And the whole idea in fantasy football, what a lot of people don't understand, in my opinion, is you're actually building for the playoffs. I play with a lot of people throughout the years, and I know that a lot of the players that I have played with never look at the playoff weeks, let's say 12 through 16. I start looking at the playoff weeks before the draft. And I basically draft players that have favorable schedules in weeks 12 through 16, the playoff season, or the last few games of the season, which are very important as well. I know a lot of people don't even think about the playoffs until the playoffs arrive, but that to me is just not thinking ahead. I mean, I basically win 95% of my fantasy football leagues, if not more. I mean, it seems like every year I get first, and then, I got second in one of my leagues last year, almost pulled it off. Again, basically, I went up against Todd Gurley, who put up a 50 in the playoff round, and anytime a non-quarterback puts up a 50, that's almost impossible to recover from. One player putting up a 50. And it was still close. I had a couple of misfortunate things, injuries, that sort of thing. I just couldn't recover from that one player putting up a 50 like that. And that happens, but generally speaking, I finish first almost every single time. And it's not because I'm the luckiest guy in the world. It's because of these simple philosophies I put in. I always joke with my people inside my league, because they're like sitting there, they have more points than me, they have a better record than me. Every year I rarely have the best record, and I rarely have the most points for, but I win the league. And the reason why, and I always joke with the players in my league, I tell them my team's built for the playoffs. And I think it goes in one ear and out the other. But the fact of the matter is my team is built for the playoffs. And I'm basically looking, even when I trade, I'm looking and I pick up waiver wire. I'm picking up players not just to help my team, but players that I think will have a favorable schedule weeks 12 through 16. That's the whole idea, because when you have a player going against a soft defense, you're basically being given points. I mean, it's just the smart way to play, and so many people don't play that way. It amazes me, and they're just like, oh, he wins it again, and he wins the league again. But this is like very, very important philosophy as far as planning for the playoffs. As far as the waiver wire is concerned in week 7, I already covered fillers. You want to look, Chester Rogers is someone people used as a filler. which is great. But Ryan Grant is about to come back. T.Y. Hilton is coming back from a hamstring injury, and that player is obsolete. What I would have done a couple of weeks ago is I would have picked up Ryan Grant, because Ryan Grant is the number 2 receiver. And the thing about quarterbacks is, I understand a filler comes in and does well, but quarterbacks tend to be, especially people like Andrew Luck or Aaron Rodgers, they tend to be very, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And they don't like a rookie coming in. They don't trust a rookie coming in, or a first-time player coming in that has a good week or two when they already have an established relationship built. 99.9% of the time, a good quarterback, an established veteran quarterback in this league, always goes back to the guy he has a relationship with. Another example of that is Valdez-Scantling on Green Bay. A lot of people picked him up. It was a filler. But I would have picked up Geronimo Allison, because he's their number 2 receiver. And, frankly, Aaron Rodgers is known for always sticking with the receivers he likes. Even when those receivers are on the field, he always throws to the receivers he likes the most. That's basically how he goes. So, you pick up a Valdez-Scantling, and he's a promising rookie, but, him and Chester Rogers, they're basically going to become obsolete once Geronimo Allison comes back and Ryan Grant comes back, which basically they're coming back this week, or Green Bay's on a bye. It's a good time to pick up Geronimo Allison. There's also, that covers a couple of wide receivers. Wide receivers in week 7, a little harder to come by. Those are 2. Some people mention Godwin. I'm just not a fan, of, the quarterback Winston he's unpredictable. And I've played those players before. I even have had Evans before. And Winston's known for just throwing up basically a goose egg, type of week. And he throws to so many receivers, which is his thing. It's very hard to predict. And I almost never pick up any Tampa Bay Buck receivers, because I've done it in the past. And the whole idea is to have reliability and consistency. You don't want a guy, putting up 21 week and, 3 the next week, and then 20 and 3 and stuff like that. It's another reason why I never play, Giants Beckham, because he'll put up a 20 or 25, and then he'll put up a 3, and then he'll put up a 25, and then he'll put up a 3. You don't want that. What you want for your team always is consistency. It's better not to get a guy who puts up 25 or 30. I'd rather trade that guy that puts up a 25 and a 3 for a guy that consistently puts up a 12 or 15 every single week. That's really, what you want, more than anything. But that's why, I talked about Chester Rogers, Geronimo Allison. And, look who's throwing him the ball. Andrew Luck, and it looks like he's back to being Andrew Luck. And, Aaron Rodgers. Go with a good quarterback. You don't want to play Russian roulette with Jameis Winston, because he's, personally, I don't think they should have made, they should have kept Fitzmagic in there, because, he has 3 good games. He lost one to the Steelers, should have won that game. And then he has a bad half, and they more or less just bench him. And he was really lighting it up with the receivers. And, some of those receivers in the team now have become obsolete with Winston in there, because he, isn't really a passing quarterback. But, you want to stay away from that. You want to stay away from any Cowboy receivers, unless they're Des Bryant. You might want to take a flyer on Des Bryant in hopes that he signs with a team. Might be a smart play. He probably will sign with a team in week 9 or 10. Could prove to be valuable asset, come playoff time. But as far as receivers go, just go with a great quarterback and a good offense. Those two are probably the best two picks, in my opinion, for a Week 7 waiver wire. Geronimo Allison, Ryan Grant. As far as running backs are concerned, a player I just picked up in one of my leagues. I'm basically winning all my leagues right now. I'm in like 6, 7 public leagues. I'm like in first place. And one league I'm in second or third or something like that. But again, it doesn't really matter because I'm building for the playoffs. Running backs. A good running back to get, in my opinion, is Ito Smith. Devontae Freeman went down, and he's basically gone for the rest of the fantasy football league. He might come back for the playoffs, they say, but Atlanta's not going to the playoffs this year. They're 2-4, and Ito Smith is getting all the goal line carries, and he hasn't really been showcased that much because they showcased the other running back they have, Coleman. Is it Coleman? Yeah. And the bottom line is, he's in a contract year, and they're not going to pay him. They're going to lose him at the end of the year. And as the year goes on, here's the thing. They weren't really playing Ito Smith because Freeman was coming back. And so they really just gave, all the carries to Coleman and, in anticipation that Freeman was going to come back. But now that Freeman's not coming back and Coleman is in a contract year, they're basically going to start, they're not going to make the playoffs. So they're going to go, as the year progresses, they're going to want to see what they have in Ito Smith because they're going to lose Coleman at the end of the year anyway. So once they realize they're not making the playoffs, which they're not going to, they're going to basically start giving the ball a lot to Ito Smith. And what a lot of people don't look at also is a player's college career. Ito Smith caught almost 50 passes a year, 45, 46, 48. All 3 years he was in the mid to upper 40s, almost 50 catches a year as a running back. And that is a ridiculously high amount for a running back because in college they don't throw the ball. So, it's, this guy can catch the ball a lot. And so they're going to really start showcasing him as the year goes on and on and on. So I think he's a great pickup. I also think Marlon Mack is another great pickup for this week because the running backs up until maybe a week ago for the Colts basically had every opportunity to really showcase their stuff, and they had no running game whatsoever, so Marlon Mack in the second half, he almost had 100 yards just in the second half of the last game, and he looked really good, and he could also catch the ball out of the backfield, and they're really trying to solidify that position because Andrew Luck is basically throwing the ball 50 to 60 times a game, which he can't sustain. I mean, you drop back to pass that many times in a game, and you're getting chased and have a bad offensive line, I mean, this guy's going to get injured again. The reason why you hand the ball off isn't just to have a balanced attack, but it's also to give the quarterback a break. And they should really not be, I don't know what their quarterback, their manager, coach, Reich is actually doing. The biggest bonehead play of the year was when they played the Texans. and there's like a minute left on the clock in overtime. They're going to tie, and it's 4th down and 3 on their own 40 something yard line, and he goes for the first down and doesn't get it, and then the Texans run one play, kick a field goal, and win the game. And after the game, he basically gets up there and says, "We're playing to win. Yeah, we don't play to tie." And that to me is the most ludicrous thing I've ever seen. I mean, I'm watching ESPN the next day, and there's certain guys, commentators, who don't know what they're talking about, basically saying, "Oh yeah, that's creating a winning culture." And really, a winning culture? How does making a decision that makes your team lose, create a winning culture? And Aaron Rodgers once said, getting a tie is like feeling like a loss. I mean, that's ridiculously, lacks. I'm sorry, but it just lacks, intelligence. I'm not saying these people aren't intelligent, but the comment lacks intelligence, because a tie, first of all, the Texans are playing a team in their division, which means it's not just a tie, but there's another team in your division that also has a tie, which basically could lead to another tiebreaker. And no, you're not playing for a tie, but you're playing to win. But if you can't win, the next winning solution, okay, basic math 101, is a tie. And especially in that division this year, the Texans division, where it looks like, the first place team is going to be 8-8, or 7-9 even. It's just, that to me is like the players are going to be so fooled into thinking it's a winning climate because their coach basically went for a win and didn't get it, and he's creating a winning culture. These guys are adults, okay? These guys aren't impressed by the fact he created a winning culture. "I'll never forget that, and now I'm going to play harder for this coach." Give me a break, I mean, I couldn't believe the next day that there were people, on ESPN, commentators, even trying to defend, probably the most idiotic call, and I don't know how long. And mind you, when you make a decision that, makes your team lose versus tie, it does things to your team, a loss. It's devastating. In fact, it's so devastating. Let's put it into perspective. The Colts have not won a game since then. They basically lost 3 in a row. And the Texans, because they won the game, they got that positive feeling from winning, and they haven't lost a game since that game, and they've won 3 in a row. But if they had just gone for the tie, at the time, I think they would have been 1-2, 1 win, 2 losses, and 1 tie. It's not that bad, and it actually gives you a little bit of a positive feeling knowing that you didn't lose, and you build off that. And, they've been tail spinning ever since that bonehead decision, and he's sitting there, "We never go for the tie." I mean, if I'm not a coach, but if I was coaching a team and we're going down, we have a chance to tie that game, I'm sitting there saying, "Let's get this tie," because this tie may be, a tiebreaker at the end of the year where we win our division by half a game. A tie is better than a loss, and it'd be one thing if it was 4th down and 1 at the 50. It was like 4th down and 3 or 4 at their own, like 43 yard line. I mean, that's just ridiculous, and going up there and defending it, I would have had more respect for him if he said, our defense wasn't, playing that well, and there was too much time on the clock. In retrospect, I probably shouldn't have gone for it, but I really, wanted to get the win. Hindsight's always 20/20. We thought we had a good play, but in the end, it probably wasn't the best decision. But, I'm trying to win football games here, and it would have just come off better. Anyway, back to the waiver wire. As far as, defenses go, you should always stream defenses. I see teams always playing the same defense every week. It to me, I don't get it. I really don't. I'm a straight shooter. I don't get that because I add up my points on defense every year at the end of the year. And I'm always number one with defenses because in defensive points against every team, they just give away points because I stream, and it's the way to play, and maybe people just get lazy and stuff. I don't know, but and everyone has their style of playing, but playing the same defense every year, every week, I see, people playing their defense against the Rams offense, and it's just, I'm going to play my defense because they're a good defense. It doesn't make any sense. If your team is playing, if your defense is going up against the Rams, the Vikings, the Saints, teams, of this, nature that are, the Patriots, team, the Chiefs, you don't play that defense, against those teams. You just don't. And there's always so many teams where there's great matchups, let's say going against the Bills. I think they have a fourth string quarterback going in there. Brock Osweiler for Miami played well last week, but let's not forget Khalil Mack went down in the first few minutes of the game and tried to play on one leg the rest of the game. And that's the reason why he had a good game, or they would have crushed. They were crushing, them in the first half, and they would have crushed them the second half. Playing first string quarterbacks, first rookie quarterbacks, Josh Rosen, things of that nature. Good teams to go up against, certainly. You don't want to go up against, Andrew Luck, because he's going to be down by 3 touchdowns every single game, and all he's going to do is, teams are going to give him, play the prevent defense, which basically prevents you from winning. I don't know why teams play that. But typical case last week, the Jets were up by 3 touchdowns in the last 8 minutes of the game. I think, Andrew Luck had like 200 yards passing because they just gave him all these, little dump off passes, and he just marched down the field 3 times. It was meaningless. But it would kill you if you played the Jets defense against, a situation like that with Andrew Luck. He's too good. You don't want to ever play defense against Andrew Luck, even now, because he's starting to look like the Andrew Luck as old. As far as tight ends go, week 7, I don't know, maybe you could take a flyer on Vance McDonald. It's just Jesse James, Vance McDonald. You never know, what the Steelers are going to do. If Austin Hooper is still available, I would take Austin Hooper. But I've had him in the past, and sometimes Austin Hooper could put up 10 catches, and then all of a sudden he puts up 1, and he's been doing that for years, and that's just the way the Falcons use him. So my thing is, you want to put a player in at tight end that will get you 10 points. In a PPR league, that's 5 catches, 50 yards. That's 10 points. If you get 10 points from, and there's lots of guys out there, well, you have Jack Doyle coming back this week. That's going to hinder Ebron's, Brait would have been a good play, but now O.J. Howard is coming back, or is back. What's a situation Jets don't have, Giants don't have? Kittle, if he's still available. He's probably not available in your league, though. Carlos, I'm sorry, the Cleveland Nagoju, their tight end. Nagoju? I never know how to pronounce his name. Nagoju? Anyway, he's actually a guy that is getting a lot of targets. He's getting, like, the last 2 weeks, he's gotten 10 targets per game. That is actually really good. And he's got a young quarterback that is a little gun shy to throw the ball, Baker Mayfield, which means quarterbacks like that like to dump the ball off a lot. And he's a mobile quarterback. And mobile quarterbacks usually don't like to throw long passes when they're scrambling. They usually like to dump the ball off. So David Njoku is probably a really good play. He's a guy that will consistently get you 5 catches, 50 yards. And he also is used quite a bit in the end zone, which actually is really good, good player to have. Of course, I have him on my team. As far as other waiver wires, defenses, I think I have the Chargers this week, but they're probably not available on the waiver wire. But as far as quarterbacks, you probably have a quarterback. I might just say you should always have 2 quarterbacks on your team. Having one quarterback, what if your quarterback goes, out and you're in week 7 picking from that litter of the quarterback? A good quarterback to have on your bench is Mitchell Trubisky. He actually puts up about 70 or 80 yards rushing, which adds to his total. He's got a formidable running game, short game with Cohen. And his receivers aren't really that bad, and they have a great defense. So they get a lot of opportunities, and he looks like he's actually coming into his own. And I don't know how many of you look at the schedule, but the Bears over these next coming weeks, the next 3 to 4 to 5 weeks, they have easy matchups coming up. The same actually could be said for Baker Mayfield. I don't know if I actually trust him enough yet to put him into my lineup, but they have a favorable schedule over the next 4 or 5 weeks. But what I would consider doing is David Njoku, tight end, Njoku. Never remember this guy's name. But he is, he's a guy that you may want to play. I don't think I would trust Baker quite yet. And that's pretty much it. I guess those are the players: Marlon Mack, Geronimo Allison, Ryan Grant. I'm not saying I would necessarily play these players this week, but they will probably be valuable to you in the coming weeks. David Njoku, Vance McDonald, Ito Smith, Mitchell Trubisky maybe as a backup quarterback. As far as streaming, it's also good to think not just streaming for this week, but maybe streaming for next week. Like, for example, I'm basically playing the Chargers and the Bears over the next 5 weeks or 6 weeks. I think up until week 14 or something like that. They basically, the weeks that the Bears are playing, the Chargers have a strong schedule, and then the weeks. And then when the Chargers have a strong schedule, the Bears have a weak schedule. And I basically planned it that way. I looked 5, 6, 7 weeks ahead. And I don't have to worry about a defense for the next 6 weeks, because for the next 6 weeks, the Chargers and Bears are playing 6. I think the Bears are playing 4 soft defenses, and I think the Chargers are playing 7 or 3 soft weeks, and they're actually not the same weeks. So I don't have to worry about it for 7 weeks. And you could even think, if you didn't have it set up that way, it's good to have 2 defenses for that or more, if you have the room on your bench. Thinking ahead like that. It's also good to switch quarterbacks and play a quarterback that goes up against a soft defense, and interchange your quarterbacks. And the last video I talked about stacking players. It's always good to pick up players, a quarterback, stacked with a wide receiver or tight end of the same team. And if you think a quarterback like Goff or Cousins is going up against a very, weak defense, it would be good if you had, maybe Rudolph and Thielen and, you know, Cousins together, or Goff, Woods, Cup, and it'd be great if you could have a running back that's a catching running back with that as well. Because if the quarterback has a good game, chances are your catching running back will have a good game. Your receiver that is on the same team as that quarterback to have a good game. The tight end of that quarterback of the same team will have a good game. And when you have a fantasy week, when you have one team going against a soft defense, not the softest defense, because in the case of that could actually work against you. Let's say the Rams are going up against the Bills and they get a huge, lead, which basically just happened the other week. I think the Rams went up against the Cardinals, and what happens there is if they have a huge lead, they just give it to Gurley, and they make their receivers obsolete. So it's better to actually have a great offense against a competitive team, because chances are it could be a shootout, and that's exactly how you want to think. I know people, they always want to play their players against a soft defense. That actually could work against you. So you got to be careful. It's not a great team against an awful team, because then they ball control it and throw short passes and basically run the ball and things like that. So that's basically, did I cover everything? Kickers, tight ends, wide receivers, running backs. Just again, when you're picking up players, just be really careful about fillers, because they take up roster spots, and if there's an exception to every rule. Maybe a T.Y. Yeldon filling in for a couple of weeks while Fournette gets better. Actually might be more than 2 or 3 weeks that he fills in. But for the most case, you don't really want to do that in fantasy football, because you want to be thinking of your playoffs. And you want to look at those weeks 12 through 16, if those are your playoff weeks. You want to look at those playoff weeks and build your team and get players that have soft schedules around those weeks. It makes me laugh that I win my league almost every year, and people are wondering, how I do it, because I'm only have maybe the fourth best record, and I'm fourth in like points for, but then the playoffs come and I basically outpoint everybody, and the reason why is those players I had were actually having tough matchups during the beginning or middle of the season, but they had real favorable matchups the last few games of the season, and most especially the playoffs. So all of a sudden, people are like, I've even had people say, oh, your players just performed, in the playoffs. No, they didn't just perform in the playoffs. It was set up that way. And that's why I win, because I picked players that had tough matchups in the beginning of the year, and you get great value on these players because their numbers are low and you could trade for them because they're going up against good, tough matchups, but then they have easy, matchups the rest of the way. Like, Goodwin, let's say, the 49ers with Beathard, they have the first 7 games of the season, they have basically, playing the best corners in the league. But their last 8 games of the season, they're basically going up against really soft teams. Goodwin, just picked them up. Would be another good waiver wire pickup for this week, because he's getting healthy. Beathard likes throwing to him. Their offense is coming around. They almost beat the Packers. I watched the game. They actually looked really good. A couple of their running backs are getting healthier, and Shanahan, they have a well-coached team, and they're going up against soft corners in the coming weeks. And Goodwin put up 2 touchdowns, 100 and some odd yards last week, and if he's still available, I would sincerely pick him up. He's not available though in the one league I'm in because I picked him up. And that's basically how you want to think, because he has a favorable schedule at the end of the year in the playoffs. And he's, really good. He's just had a hamstring injury. And so that's basically waiver wire week 7, 2018. You could certainly also subscribe to this channel. I'll try to post or not, it's up to you. But I'll try to post as many weekly videos as well. And you could actually, I have a Facebook chat room under Fantasy Football RSVP. You can join it, but it's a closed room. I'll explain. It's closed, but it's by invitation only. But if you send me a message, even though you're not part of the room, I think on Facebook, you could actually still send a message. Just tell me who you are. Tell me, a little bit about yourself so I know you're legitimate. It protects you, it protects the members in the room. But I really would like to have a lot of members in this room so people could just talk about fantasy football and talk about their lineups. And there aren't, surprisingly enough, there really isn't many free forums that people can just say, I'm playing this guy, what do you think? And have, 30, 40, 50, 60 people respond. I just started it yesterday, so there's only 2 members. But if you would like to join Fantasy Football RSVP on Facebook page, just email me a friend request, and I could still, even if you're not a member yet, I could still read your message on Facebook. Just, tell me a little bit about yourself, whatever, just so I know you're real. I want to have real people in there and protect the members, obviously. And I'll look at your Facebook page, see that you're a real person and that sort of thing. And hopefully, it can grow to a point where on a weekly basis, and like I said, it's shocking that there aren't more forums like this. That's why I created it, where you can basically go and get, fantasy football advice or lineup advice and maybe hear, 20 or 30 or 40 people's opinions, which would be really, it's a great thing to do. And I'm glad I started it, and probably take me a little bit of time to really develop it and stuff like that. But, certainly join. It would be great to have a fantasy football, community. It would be something to be very proud of. I'm part of this fantasy football, community. There's hundreds of people talking about fantasy football. It's great. You get advice. You post your lineup, and people will tell you what they think or what they saw or their perspective. And, it's kind of cool to be part of something like that. I'm glad I started it, but feel free to join. Anyway, I wish you all the best. I wish you the best this week 7. And just start making your lineup thinking about weeks 12 to 16 for the playoffs, because it really does work. And it's why, I've had tremendous success, in my leagues just by doing that little thing that most people don't even think of. So have a wonderful day. And until next time, Dean Curry. Take care. Bye.